for the Unity of Springfield Adult Education and World Religions class for on this beautiful sunny morning.
Oh, yeah.
St. Patrick's Day.
That's why I wore green.
Rain. Huh.
I thought a parade was yesterday.
Yeah.
And I got up, I was going to put something else on, and something just said put green on, and Tamara and I ended up going to the parade. So.
Very cool. So today we're going to continue, or this is part 2 of Endless Practice, which is based on this book by Mark Nepo. And really, I think this book would be a really good spirit book. Probably 2 cycles of spirit groups could be done to really dig deep in each of the chapters, and because it's already got questions that are oriented around unity principles, and it's a really good fit. So if anybody's interested, if anybody accesses this book, buys this book, reads it, or whatever, looks at it online, and is interested in doing so, let me know, or let the office know, and we can help support you in that. I'd be glad to support some of you in doing that. So last week, I'm just going to do a little quick review over the 6 practices that we talked about last week. And then we're going to go ahead and move into a couple of chapters. And then we're going to do some quotes. And then towards the end, then we're going to address some things we can do when we're just feeling broken, and when we're aware that we're broken. And so that's what's on tap this morning. As you kind of already getting the idea, if you were here last week, either online or here in person, that he's getting us to look at the material world, the 3-dimensional material world, as well as the spirit part of us, and the emotion part, digging deep and not avoiding emotion, and also using our rational mind. So there's a lot of dichotomies involved, and there's a lot of this moving from one to the other, which is just the way he's really trying to reflect the way we are as humans, and in some ways really normalize that. And also, one of his main points is that we have a tendency when we're uncomfortable or in pain, it's natural to try to avoid the pain.
Yes.
And yet, the pain is often, by leaning into what is painful and difficult, sometimes is a message that that's a road that we kind of need to travel for a while. But we can only do it so much. So it's also very okay that it's a gradual, that it doesn't happen, that we don't do it all the time, because we need to protect ourselves. So we do, and then we'll go back. And so we'll get into that a little bit. I'd like to go ahead and start with just the same meditation as we started with last week. So just get kind of comfortable in your chair. Pay attention to our breath. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes. Breathe fully and comfortably. And as you inhale, imagine moving beyond yourself through the crown of your head exploring the world, meeting new beings with awe and love. As you exhale, imagine moving into the depths of who you are, resting in self-compassion, understanding, and love. As you inhale, feel the excitement, the energy of something new, something different. And as you exhale, feel that comfort of an old comfortable shoe that you're relaxing back into, or a leather chair. As you inhale, notice the increase in energy. And as you exhale, notice the calmness throughout your mind and your body. Okay, when you feel comfortable, open your eyes. So the 6 practices that we talked about last week. The first one was, I'm just going to review quickly, the practice of uncertainty is patience. The practice of opportunity is learning to trust. The practice of courage is doing small things with love. The practice of connection is holding and listening. And the previous 4 practices lead us to exploration, mastery, and abandonment. And then the 6th practice is life of expression. Because what we feel, think, and experience is often inaudible until it is expressed. So, again, with this ebb and flow idea, the Sufis have a practice that he shares with us called polishing the heart. Living in the world creates a film over our heart, which is just our way of protecting ourselves. When something is triggering some hurt, or we're concerned that we might be hurt or rejected, or that we might become angry. And so we try to protect ourselves by putting on this film. And then there's the really digging into whatever is going on that we're putting the film on, and scouring and cleansing and really leaning into whatever that is that we were kind of avoiding, that emotion. And usually it's feelings and emotions. Sometimes it's also thoughts that can have that trigger response and that response. And the goal, and there is no arrival in this process, this polishing of the heart. You're never done. You see, you're never one and done. You're never like there. Oh, I've arrived. It's not like nirvana or anything. It's just this process that we all go through all of the time. of filming and polishing. Almost just like a breath, but it's probably not as frequent as breathing. And the goal isn't to stay clean or to get dirty, but to stay engaged in that unending process of being aware, noticing that we're filming. It's not wrong to film. It's not wrong to protect your feelings. And when we're not aware of it, then we lose touch, we lose sight of where are we in the process. And what's happening? What is it that is triggering us? What is it that we're concerned about? And then finding out whether or not, it's really safe to lean into. And in cognitive behaviors, therapy research and behavior therapy research, what we know is that when we lean into something that's uncomfortable, and we don't become overwhelmed, we don't lose our cookies in that process, then it's less anxiety provoking. Yes. Okay. And it works, and there's a huge amount of research about how powerful that is. The question is, how much do we dive into it? And there's no one answer for that. That's a personal choice that each of us always needs to make. How much do we dive into uncomfortable situations? And we gauge by our emotions, our emotional response, how far we can go. And if we have a lot of confidence, we can make a big jump and sometimes have very quick radical change. And other times we just go inch by inch. And that seems to be what makes sense and what works for us at that time. So there's not a right answer. It's just sharing with us this process that we all go through. And that when we're polishing the heart, we're opening our heart. And we're opening ourselves up to possibilities that will not be there when the film is covered. Okay. So he's just kind of stating where that process is and inviting us to kind of listen and pay attention to ourselves as we go along. He says, the endless practice here is to live out a constant commitment to aliveness, to stay engaged in the ongoing journey of being filmed over only to be scoured into a clear vessel again and again. He also says, regardless of what seems fair or not, we're asked to arrive at some kind of acceptance of the paradox that much of what has happened to us is painful. And it's the one life that we have. The work of being and the friction of becoming are inextricably, I can't say this word, inextricably knitted together. So, just being, and then the act of becoming, the act of growing, has a necessary friction attached to growth, where the rubber meets the road, where we're on the edge of our comfort zone and going beyond that comfort zone. And then that's where we get. So he talks about keeping an open heart, and then he uses a lot of metaphors. So he was talking about this story of, he was giving a talk, and this marine biologist came up to him and told him that his metaphor was just totally senseless and didn't make any sense at all. And he had used one that had something to do with the sea creatures. So this guy was like an expert on the sea creatures. So he decided that what he would do, and he knew this about him, so he decided he would just ask him to teach him everything he knew about, that he could, about the sea creatures, about marine biology. You know, what was it that he needed to know? And so this fellow tried to do that and gave him some information, and then in the process, he kind of softened towards Nepo, Mark Nepo, and then he asked him, you know, to consider the metaphor again, and just to sit with it and see what happens. He doesn't go into what the result of that, but then he talks about, well, so then he goes home. He calls a friend of his, and he tells his friend what an asshole this guy was in his thing. Now he didn't say that to him, but he did to his trusted friend. He says, "God, this really ran into a real asshole to the work, you know, when I was doing this presentation." And he goes, "Well, clearly he isn't, but sometimes it's important to honor your own emotions. You know, sometimes you need to have a vent of that, because those emotions are real. Now, they might be, like we were talking before, but they might be opinions, and they might not be totally accurate, and but the emotions are real. So we need to honor those and not just squash them because then that's going to be filming. We're going to be filming to try to protect ourselves. Sometimes we need to have some safe spaces in our life to share that emotion." And then he was able to then look at it and go, "Oh yeah, maybe he isn't. Maybe he isn't an asshole, but that's how I felt at the time, and he felt like he needed to protect himself, and was also kind of glad that he noticed at the time that those were his feelings that he was experiencing, and which had nothing to do with what the guy was presenting to him, because that was his stuff that he was frustrated. He was trying to protect himself from the metaphor that Mark Nepo was presenting to him, which was causing him to have to look at himself in an uncomfortable way. So, and so this is kind of to explain that, you know, we're all human. We're all doing this. You know. So when other people get upset at us and we're going, where's that coming from? Well, it's not coming from us. And we don't need to attack the other person, because we're really not being attacked if we don't receive it that way. If we go, oh, they must be going through some stuff, that's probably correct.
Yeah.
And we can, you know, we don't have to take it as an attack. We can say, okay. And sometimes we're leaning in and say, well, you know, sometimes people need to figure out a way to process it. And maybe you're the person, maybe you're not the person. But either way, just be aware that this is just something, this is part of the ebb and flow of it. You know? And people get nice in the same shoes that they get angry. A reflective pause. How do you experience the rhythm of being and becoming? How do you experience the rhythm of covering up, protecting yourself, and stepping out and being vulnerable to something that's uncomfortable?
Well, for me, it's not working.
Try it again.
Hello.
There you go. It's working.
Well, for me, it's a situation have to work through it. It's like the good and the bad doesn't matter. God is both. You have to love them all. And so this is what helps me be in the becoming, because I can surely become extremely angry at times. Even though I hope I don't put it out there. But at the same time, I have to recognize that that's who I am. Okay, it's part of me. And the one person I have to love is me, and so me, I have to figure out how to get over this anger thing. And I've learned something really well here in the last few days is if you say to yourself, I choose, I'm angry, and I choose anger because I believe this is what I should do. This is what I thought in the situation. At the same time, it's not the best way to go. But at the same time, you can say the same thing about when you're doing really well. When you're doing really well towards anybody, or just the whole group, or just the way you think about the whole group. You can also tell yourself and confirm that this is what I believe. This is what I see. This is what I choose. You know, because both of them are a choice. And so you have to love them both. But I feel, for me, that whenever I do this with my negative feelings, I can recognize them. And I can love the little boy that is having this feeling. And if I do the other about how good I'm doing, I'm patting myself on the back. And it's okay to pat yourself on the back. You're okay.
So you're doing a couple of things there. You do first the awareness,
Yeah.
then the awareness that you have choice,
Yes.
and then making it.
Making the choice. And then I believe, whenever I say I believe, a lot of our beliefs come from when we were being raised from 1 to 5. We were just instilled with these beliefs, and we became angry because we saw the people around us and how they reacted to something themselves. And so the hardest part is just being able to recognize that little boy in each, or the little girl in each one of us. We have to recognize it, accept it, and love it, and say it'll be all okay. Yeah. If that's, you know.
Because some things are hardwired, and
Yeah.
you just have to be aware of that. Yes?
I was going to say, one thing, the first thing I realized in therapy as a kid is that emotion was my triggers for everything, right? Like, like the blackout phases, the disappearances, the times I don't know where I'm going, like I wake up and I'm just somewhere else, you know what I mean? And I figured out early on it was my emotions, but the one I had to fight the most as a kid was anger, right? If I hit anger, it went into some really bad things as a kid. And, I don't know how to describe something that I was not awake for, right? Because in my head, it's blackout. I'm seeing flashes of images, but it's not the images or anything that's happening in front of me. And then back, and then I have to figure out what the hell happened. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well,
and then
association.
It's each emotion is different though. Like, so with anger though, I figured out early on, one of the best ways to do it is to control that chemical and then that thought, and then you work in regression. Why does that thought make you angry? Why does that thought change your state? Why does that thought change your decision, right? What is the causality before the final conclusion, why? And I guess I overprocess why too much.
You're not the only one.
Yeah.
You're not the only one.
The question that never stops is, why do I do this? Why do I do this? I mean, I can break, at this point, after 30 years in therapy, I can break myself down just as well as anyone with a PhD. And when I talk to someone with like a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree, I can tell the difference in their thought processes and their ideologies talking to over 20 doctors in my life. And, you know, it's a really interesting thing how I'm looked at and perceived now as an adult, you know, and man, it's even worse trying to work with other humans. And I'm still, in my head, every time I'm dealing with them and I want to lash out, I'm still dealing with the flashes of images. I'm never able to shut that off. It's like the way my other voices, let's say, talk to me, they're not voices, they're images, right? Because my memory is nothing but images, flashes, pictures. You know, the joke I make in therapy is they used to all be connected like a Rolodex, and I could go through each one. And now it's like I threw everything on the floor at one point, said fuck it, and started lighting the room on fire. And then at another point, I stopped, put the room out, and started trying to put everything on the board, and now I just got red lines everywhere trying to connect everything. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that makes sense.
It's a journey. It's a journey. So every person's condition, this is a quote, every person's condition is a solution in hieroglyphic to those inquiries we would put. We act it as life before we apprehend it as truth. So basically, and that's by Ralph Waldo Emerson, he's talking that we experience life first before we have any understanding. So experience is a teacher for us. And that's kind of what he's wanting us to take as an attitude, so that when stuff happens, rather than taking it so personally, it's an opportunity for us to come to a better understanding of everything. And that when we have that kind of attitude, which is kind of in your head as opposed to in your heart, but it gives us that ability to kind of look at things and increase our awareness of what's going on with us. Gnosko is a Greek word. It means to come to know, the recognition of truth through experience. And Mark Nepo says that recognition that can only happen through time. And time slowly expresses the story of our lives with its friction, wearing away the film that covers our eyes and the calluses that guard our heart, until we apprehend the wonder waiting just under the skin of everything. And I really like his, because he's a poet, so he's, there's so much metaphor in this book because of the way that he writes, because he writes poetically. And so and what I like about poetry so much, what I love about poetry, is that it is both thought and emotion blended into the phrases, so that it's rarely is it just a rational statement. It's always kind of going between the two worlds on an ongoing basis, and I think that's one of the reasons that it can touch us in a way that regular prose does not. So he gives a couple of examples. One of them, the one I'll use is Aslan and the White Witch. So C.S. Lewis wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. Aslan's the lion. And he's the life-affirming, mystical lion. He appears from time to time to restore balance and empowers others to go on to their quests that they go on in the book. Whereas the White Witch of Narnia is this energy-draining, life-draining, that freezes the life out of the landscape. throughout the stories, and turns people and animals into statues, frozen. And theirs is a classic battle, and it's our battle. That's, like, I remember when I was young, and I was just starting to get an awareness there was all kinds of crazy stuff going on in my house. And I remember saying to myself, I feel like I have rhinoceros skin. Because things would be happening, and I didn't feel anything. I had protected myself to the point to where I would just objectively describe what was going on. Even though I was in the middle of it, I couldn't go to the feeling part at that time. And I have been to the Natural History Museum in Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, and I've been to natural history and seen the rhinoceros and elephant skin on the models that are at the museum that they have. And it's hard and crusty and rough, and I just felt that's what was covering up my emotions and keeping me from actually experiencing it fully. And it takes years then to peel it back, layer at a time, because it was too dangerous at the time to do that. And then there's another metaphor or story that he uses called Jupiter and the Bee, which gets at what can be, it's just instructive about how anger can not always be helpful, not just to the people around us, but to ourselves. And so it's the story of the honeybee goes up to Jupiter and says, he says, "Give me, I pray thee, a sting, that if any mortal shall approach to take my honey, I may kill him." Jupiter is sorely displeased, but can't refuse his promise. Carefully he answers the bee, "You shall have your request, but at the peril of your life. For if you use your sting, it shall remain in the wounds you make, and then you will die from the loss of it." And so, which is just kind of the metaphors when we hold on to anger. It's, a part of us dies.
Turns into resentment.
Turns into resentment. It doesn't help us. It's something that clouds over us and keeps us from being able to experience love and compassion.
Yeah, I had this saying that came to me as anger is a poison we feed ourselves, expecting the other person to die.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, whenever I was working at Walmart, I got dismissed there for reasons that wasn't my fault, so I had a resentment from them. But I still had, there was co-workers that I wanted to stay in contact with, so I did a forgiveness prayer, and I said, I still want to be able to go back to that store and shop and stuff, and I said, and I can't do that and still have anger at the place. So I told myself, I said, I got to do a forgiveness. Then that way I can move on and still function.
Very good. Very good. Yeah, that's a good example of having that awareness and then, again, realizing you have a choice and then following through, doing something about it. So the next chapter that we're going to cover that he did is called the Sanctity of Experience, and this is the one that we're in. And he goes into, and this is on the handout then, is the things that hearten and dishearten. And first, there's a couple of quotes. He says, "This requires a special kind of listening, awakened by our strength of being and our strength of compassion. Over time, the act of facing things openly and honestly can evolve our fight and flight and freeze reflex beyond its primitive response. Facing conflict and fear can keep us in relationship with our experience long enough to uncover what we have in common with every living thing. And all our experience wears us down to something essential that moves through everything. When we can recognize this essential being that moves through everything, accept it, love it, and we can feel the place that no one can hold and know that we are whole." So he talks about things that hearten and dishearten. So we're going to start with the things that dishearten. And he focuses on fears. The first one is the fear of the unknown, that I won't see it coming. And it infects our distrust of the days, of the world. The fear of being undone, that the worst possible outcome will happen, which breeds cynicism. The fear of rejection, that I will speak the truth and everyone will leave, leads to the practice of hiding and avoiding. And then the fear of death, that the clock will keep beating louder, enslaves us to panic and urgency. Now, fear is an emotion. But we get informed, we have thoughts that are in relationship with those fears. We don't experience the fears without thoughts that become possibly invasive and that inform us that, I should feel anxious or fearful about something. So then he gets into, okay, what's the flip side? What heartens? So to strengthen trust, and this, which really gets to those practices that we talked about last week. To strengthen trust, we can expand our ways of being to include surprise, and deepen our ways of feeling to include wonder and curiosity. So, and this is something I personally found to be really powerful. So that when somebody behaves in a way that I don't expect, and maybe even is directed at me in a negative way, I get curious, like, what, not like what's going on, what's wrong with you, but what's going on? What it's almost like a puzzle to solve.
Yeah.
What's happening? Because I don't know where all the pieces are. There's some spaces in there that I'm not privy to. And so can I get to a place of just seriously listening and observing so that I can start to make some sense of what's happening? Yeah.
Where it says the clock will keep beating louder and enslave us to panic and urgency.
Yes.
You could also say it keeps us in bondage too.
Sure.
Does he mention anything for the people that the clock doesn't exist?
No. No, and you can also make the argument that it doesn't. I mean, that's true. That can be true too. Did you?
So recently I moved from a place of pride and ridicule of people that watched The Bachelor and Love is, these reality, matchmaking shows. And my intuitive or my internal self one day I felt was feeling like I was guided somehow, to watch one of these series. And it was Love is Blind. The people meet in pods where they is sight unseen and they date, in these and as a result of that, I lost the ridicule not only of people that watch these kind of things, but it healed some place in me that judges people for how they react and how they emote and how they, because I saw how it was so obvious how many times the people weren't communicating. Like, we could see it from out here. Like, that wasn't what he was saying, what you thought you heard, And so my question, actually, is why I took the mic, is just a little bit, and you're kind of going into it, but the challenge in my life right now is to have an awareness, a bit of awareness of my will and whether I'm choosing the filter or the present heart conscious place or whatever, but sometimes finding that feels like the healthy thing is to step into the mud and look at it and, I know that there's grace, and sometimes I just am able to be on with it, and out of it, but sometimes the process seems to require a bit of stopping. Like I was telling Elby yesterday, I had a friend that would say, face it, embrace it, erase it, So my struggle is finding some kind of clarity, and it almost feels like there just is a decision I'm looking for about how when you are feeling angry, when you're having a reaction, you don't want to stuff it, you don't want to act it out, like with the judgment attached to it to the other person. You want to make sure that you're moving that energy, releasing and moving it in a healthy way, and sometimes I am just at a total loss of how that's best done.
Well, that's one of the reasons he calls it practices.
Yes.
As a kid, I was taught to put impulses into action, right? If you remove the impulse that gets pent up in your brain, it removes the desire to do the function, and therefore you filter it into a new thing. So, for instance, my aggression, I usually filter into video games, right? Artificial intelligence, I'm not actually hurting anyone. Let's take my OCD, I like to put it into my cooking. I feel like that's the healthiest use of it. I don't know if it is or not. I probably shouldn't count as many calories as I do. And I think that is also a practice of it. I think this is said in a lot of ways. What it reminds me the most of is actually Wing Wei. Like if you study the ebb and flow of energy, right? If you have the thought or desire to do something, like he said, build up regression, what's the other word for it? But you don't want desire to do control. I can't think of it. Stone thought. Anyway, but like if you get it out and release it, it's no longer poisoning you, right? I don't know.
Sure. I mean, there's the thing is.
Walking, for instance, when I feel restless.
Sure. I mean, we there's ways of, and there's reasons for that too. I mean, to use physical activity changes brain chemistry and can allow one to feel better. Also, it can get out some of that. And anger itself, as an emotion, its function is to give you energy to try to accomplish something that a goal being blocked, and you're trying to accomplish that. So if you decide mentally, okay, I'm going to slightly shift the goal, and I'm going to accomplish something with this anger. It may not be what's frustrating, it may not be what the cause is, but I'm going to choose to shift the focus of what goal I'm going to, and I'm going to take this energy that the anger has given me, and I'm going to direct it towards what I'm choosing to try to, that I think I reasonably can be successful at accomplishing. And then, so that's a very healthy
With a less
way of
negative
managing.
impact than currently had, right? As a child,
Right.
that was my give and take. Is
Right.
more
And you-
positive interaction from my environment, less negative.
Right. And when we're young, we don't have that capacity to do that shift, that parrying shift and choice thing. But as adults, we can do that.
And we talked about this week with chopping wood and putting your energy into chopping wood. Louise Hay suggests, going off by yourself and screaming or beating on a pillow or something that will, because you've got that adrenaline and it needs to be directed in our society, we don't always have a way that is taught that we're appropriate to use that. And so she would say, get it out in some way, if walking does it, it wouldn't for me, but sometimes screaming or beating a pillow or something that has an action that redirects it.
What I really encourage is that people have a regular practice that they do of some kind, something physical. It doesn't have to be exercise, but something that they do, whether it's going dancing or going for a walk, nature walks, or riding a bike or whatever. But when you have that regular activity, it makes it more accessible when we need it.
With what she was saying, I had a blacksmith friend up in El Dorado Springs that him and his wife didn't get along the bestest in the West.
Mm-hmm.
So whenever they was having an argument, he had his blacksmith shop at his house, and he would just go down to the blacksmith shop and start his forge up and pound out and start forging out some knives.
Mm-hmm.
He made knives and sold them too. And he said, whenever we start fighting, I just go down to there and just start pounding out some knives.
There you go.
And with me, whenever I'm having some anger type issues, I will just go outside and walk around and walk down the street and kind of do a walking meditation.
Mm-hmm. Let me real quick go through the next three of the heartening ones, and then open it up again. To strengthen what is possible, we can imagine and spend equal time with what might go right as with what might go wrong. And many of us are familiar with the Wendy Audlin's what if and just that whole idea that, and he's not saying to just be Pollyannish and not hold on to, and not ignore what it is that might go wrong, but give equal time to what might go right. We can get into a funk where all we see is just what the negative outcomes can be. To strengthen our ability to integrate pain, we can try to be like water and learn to absorb what falls on us and how to flow instead of shatter. So this is moving from rigidity to flexibility, and the ability to, just like with anger, but any kind of pain, to find, okay, what's it teaching me? What is there for me to learn here? How do I let it affect me, but not just choose to only be a victim to it? How do I take this painful, difficult situation and you know, and if you don't, what happens? It happens again. That's exactly right. So we might as well, you know, say, okay, I'm going to try and figure this out. You know, let's go for it. Okay, and to shrink our habit of hiding, we can listen to experience as a teacher and wait in the open for the truth to show itself, the ways that trees grow toward the sun. I love trees, too. Especially anybody that gets a chance to go to Northern California and see those huge redwoods. You could almost feel the wisdom of something that's been alive for 2,000 years. You know?
It sounds like they're speaking in the wind.
To shrink the press and urgency of time, we can linger in the moment and try to accept our death. And I don't know if this is age related, but it wasn't something that really I figured out or got any sense about it until I was in my 50s. But it just became, oh, okay. There was just this acceptance, and there's some I really recommend the Tibetan book of the Living and the Dead. As a way of just kind of incorporating the awareness that our time here in the three-dimensional reality is really very brief, and how do we just kind of figure that out, and it's okay, and not only is it brief, but it's also connected to the infinite. So there's another one of those juxtapositions, another one of those, it's brief, that we can do these things, so there's a little bit of urgency, but yet there's none at all, because it'll all wash out in the end. Okay. And the exercise then is to describe 2 or 3 things that are disheartening right now. And 2 or 3 things that are heartening. And what does each of the disheartening things have in common? And what do the things that are heartening to us have in common? And how can we calm the disheartening? How can we lean into the heartening?
So a big example for me is the fear of rejection and truth. So the thing that speaks to me is the fear of rejection and truth. I've been thinking about it the last few years. I'm so honest that I refuse to give up the honesty because the other humans aren't willing to accept. My degree is dark, void, or discolorful, let's say, for my choose of vernacular choices. And, my degree of acceptance comes from a life that people aren't willing to accept if I talk about it. That's like talking to the guy the other day. He's like, man, your life sounds like a movie. We could make a lot of money on this. And I'm just like, dude, I don't want to. Like, I just want to be in the woods away from everyone doing my own damn thing.
That's like my brother's remodeling this old farmhouse. And he really doesn't like a lot of people to come visit because they all have opinions about what he should be doing with it. And he goes, I don't even want to hear your stuff. He goes, I know. I'm the one that bought this house, this little farm, and I've got my own, I don't want to hear any of your crap. He's a retired architect. He's got very clear ideas of what he's doing and how he's going to do it. And he's a little different, he's got different ideas than most people do. All his neighbors laugh at him because he doesn't use big power equipment and tractors and front loaders and things like that. He does everything by hand, but he's doing it, and sometimes we just have to
Leave me alone, I want to do it
Just,
my way.
we have to be true to ourselves. We have to.
I think, what I tell everyone, why I'm probably going to go to jail Tuesday is, I'm going to look at that judge and I'll be like, look now, I'm going to tell you straight up, I passed more tests as a human than most do. Okay? I'm already in a 1% class where most of you humans have not achieved the achievements I achieved before I was even 20. And, man, I'm not trying to be arrogant or an asshole, but I know what I want to do with my life, and I'm sick of everyone telling me how I should poison my body for their acceptance of their rules. Not my acceptance of their rules. They don't even want to hear my damn level of acceptance of their rules. And I usually, like I said earlier, keep my opinions to myself. And I have a lot of jokes on all of that.
Oh, that's good.
And the shrink the habit of hiding, I don't know if I am hiding. It doesn't feel like hiding when acceptance just feels peaceful.
Okay, I'm going to try and rip through. We have some quotes, and then we're going to hit the last section. The longer we can resist the temptation of fear and withdrawal or aggression, in order to discern what is truly threatening from what is stressful and uncomfortable, the less violent our reactions. The longer we can resist the temptation of fear, whether it's withdrawal or aggression, in order to discern what is truly threatening from what is stressful and uncomfortable, the less violent our reaction. The longer we can resist the temptation of fear, in order to discern what is truly threatening from what is stressful and uncomfortable, the less violent our reactions are. So now we're get a little bit into the opening our heart. The saying yes that joins us to life is our openness to lean into the very pulse of existence wherever it finds us. The presence of such life force is always near. It can touch us and informs us, reforms us, and whenever we can stop what we're doing, what we're anticipating, or what we're regretting, even briefly. To learn how to ask for what we need, only to practice accepting what we're given. This is our journey on earth. And this is kind of the statement of the entire book. To learn how to ask what we need, only to practice accepting what we're given. This is our journey on earth. There are two eternal practices that bring us in alignment with the unity of life, and at first they seem to contradict each other, but they are two sides of one paradox, two sides of a dime. Asking for what we need is a practice in being present and visible that lets us become intimate with our own nature. And accepting what we're given is a practice in being present to everything beyond us. To become intimate with the nature of life. Knowing ourselves thoroughly is how we clean our lens. And when we clean the lens, that is the self, then we're ready to receive everything that is beyond us. So it's that polishing, the mirror, and cleaning that lens so that we can just see what is. And often when we're feeling more clear, we don't have to jump. Because it's like, oh.
one thing I gotta say that the first thing was said here was the fear of the unknown. Once I realized there is no such thing as unknown, that all of it is source, that there's nothing to fear.
Right, okay.
There's,
So I'm gonna finish up because we're running late. What do we do when we're broken? Accept the weather. Realizing that we will be broken is not a pessimistic view, but a wholehearted acceptance of the unfolding of the nature of life. Second one is lean into the tender place. That's where we get resilience. We don't become resilient if we're always avoiding what we're concerned about. We get resilience and strength from leaning into it and getting through it. Ask yourself, what kind of part am I in what kind of whole? So, how do I fit into this universe? And what is the universe? And, I mean, there's no answer here. It's just a part of but it's the attitude of our looking at it through that lens. And then look beyond the broken. It's essential to remember that all life is not where we are. In other words, whenever we're going through something, and it seems like everything's upside down, crap, whatever, that's not the way it is everywhere. That's not the whole. That's just in the moment, our experience at the time. Okay. Announcements.
Oh, real quick. I am going to pass the basket. If you are watching online and would like to support this ministry, you can go to www.unityofspringfield.org /give, or just click the give on that page. And really quick, you mentioned Pollyanna. And one of the things, every time I hear somebody say Pollyanna, I always think, she really was the hero of that story, though. Yeah. So anyway, I'm going to pass the basket, and John will do the announcements.
So everyone is invited back to the church this evening at 6 p.m. for Sunday evening meditation. The monthly board meeting is tomorrow, March 18th at 6 p.m. And everyone's invited. There's always, they share the budget information and stuff, and there's no secrets on the board. There's, they start, you're excused for a little bit because they do a check-in. The board does a check-in every point. And then if there's, and then when they do staff things, then they ask you to leave. But otherwise, it's open. Next Sunday at 9:15, a New Thought and World Religion class. Mary Bilzebeck-Huber will begin a two-part series on boundaries. Ooh. We are now accepting yard sale donations. You can drop items off anytime the church is open, Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4 p.m., and Sundays 9 to noon. Planet Unity is a month away, and we need more sponsors. Individuals or businesses can be a sponsor. If you have a contact and a business, please reach out and ask if they're interested. All the event information is on our website, and there are flyers out there in the foyer that you can take. Remember to order your Planet Unity t-shirts. The order form is on the table in the foyer. There are size samples hanging on the foyer. The deadline to order is April 4th. We are collecting empty toilet paper and paper towel rolls for a planting activity at Planet Unity. Springfield Community Gardens is supplying all the seeds and asked if we would help collect the empty rolls. We will have our spring yard cleanup this Saturday, March 23rd at 9 a.m. There's a sign-up sheet on the table in the foyer. All help is greatly appreciated. Jen's going to talk about asking for Easter egg hunt and candy donations for the young people programs. And it's time to order your Easter lily. We do this each year, display them on the platform during the Easter Sunday service. And the cost is $15, and then of course you take them home with you after the service. And the order form again is out there on the table on the foyer. Yes?
And also, they donate the lilies to nursing home people, right? The people also, that's what
That's a good, okay, so
I think.
I'm hearing that you also have the option, if you don't want to take it home, is to donate it to one of the nursing homes here in our community.
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.